Identifying author's bias. How to identify author's bias in a text. Today, Sir Kyle will introduce you to some facts about bias and steps on how to spot them. An important part of evaluating an author's ethos, feelings, emotions and even purposes through identifying his or her bias. What is bias? Bias in writing can be defined as a prejudice against something an author is writing about. Bias is any opinion that influences a person's thoughts, feelings, or actions. A person can be biased against something or have a bias for something. An author's bias is any opinion or prejudice that affects that author's writing and prevents the author from being completely neutral about the topic or issue about which he or she is writing. How to determine what an author's bias is. The author may express directly some of his or her biases by telling the reader his or her opinions on certain topics or admitting that he or she has a conflict of interest or preference. But when an author does not acknowledge his or her own bias, a skilled reader can infer what an author's bias may be by looking at the author's diction and use of evidence. When looking at the author's use of evidence, ask yourself, does the author present more positive evidence for one side of an issue than the other? Does the author present more negative evidence for one side of an issue than the other? These are both clues that the author may be biased for or against a particular side. When looking at the author's diction, ask yourself, does the author use words with more negative connotations when referring to one side of an issue or particular people? Does the author use words with more positive connotations when referring to one side of an issue or particular people? These connotations are another clue to what or whom the author may be biased for or against. In recognizing bias, look for loaded words. Words that are charged with emotion, whether positive or negative, can reveal an author's opinion about any topic. Watch for stereotypes. If the author labels an entire group, the writing is biased. Notice vague language or generalizations. If the author isn't using specific language, this is an indicator of bias. Does the author present facts or opinions? Facts are the truth, but opinions can be based on feelings, emotions, or prejudices. On a simpler note, it is important to identify bias in a text you are reading. It's important to understand bias when you are reading because it helps you see the purpose of a text.